Welcome to the Value Builder Podcast, where we focus on real estate with a value-add mindset. Real strategies, real operators, real outcomes. Let's dive in.
All right, Value Builder community. Today I have interesting educational pod that I believe with many is going to be very useful. I've got Matt DeVito and Marek with me. These guys do something most people don't even exist. They literally lift roofs on industrial buildings. So if you've got an older building with low clear heights, they can literally raise an entire roof and give you modern warehouse specs. So Matt and Rob, how is it going for you this morning?
Great, Saul. How are you doing?
So do you work nationwide or mostly where do you focus?
We're nationwide. We go all over the country doing this, but it's heavily clustered in urban and suburban industrial areas with lots of old buildings.
Why don't you walk me through, like, in very simple first grader steps? How does the process work? Lifting the roof for an industrial building.
So, there has to be an analysis of all of the building systems, including structural, lighting, HVAC, fire protection, things like that. And then we do cost estimates to figure out how much it might cost. Usually the questions come and they're framed like, can this be done? Is it possible? And I usually try to reframe those questions away from can it be to should it be? Because it's sort of like fixing a car. The answer is always yes, you can do whatever you want to do to it. Yes, you can fix it. It doesn't always mean it makes sense, but the analysis of these building systems, as well as the value of the building and what the building might be worth, either in storage or as a real estate asset after it's raised, is part of the calculation.
Makes sense. So let's say, from practical engineering perspective, when you're raising the roof, so it means you're just cutting the skirting and a little raising the roof. If you can walk me through the process, how does it work from like a construction perspective?
I'll take that one. So, think of your building as a table with legs, right? But your building has many legs. So what we're ideally trying to do is convert the vertical posts or columns into telescopes. And we do that using structural steel. We either wrap what's there or we replace them with a telescopic column assembly. After that's done, we install our hydraulic equipment. We turn everything on at the same time, and that's what creates lift. Now, obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's cuttings, there's separations, there might be some foundational work, but that's the essence of how the system works. We turn every vertical support point into a telescope, and then we attach hydraulics and we raise the roof in that manner.
So what happens on the outside on the walls? So let's say if it's a masonry building, so you're literally cutting with a saw, you're just disconnecting the building. And how does that process work? Let's say disconnecting mechanical.
There's usually two ways it's supported. It's either steel supported or supported by the masonry. It's a load bearing wall. In the case where it's steel supported, we're going to lift the steel that's there. So we'll make the necessary cuts and separations. And then the steel that's there goes up and gets infilled with new steel. In the case where it's a masonry wall, we're going to add new steel inside and use that to then convert the building from masonry bearing to steel framing. Typically, there are some cases where on a short lift, we can just use temporary means to get the roof up and then reset it back down masonry bearing if the walls can be blocked up adequately. But that's, it's a case by case basis. When we do our estimating, these are all the things that we look at and the scenarios we run through with our clients.
And then as it pertains to the other building systems, you've got lighting, heating, sprinklers, roof drains. All of those things need to be disconnected, extended, modified, replaced. It's not necessarily driven by lifting the roof itself. It's driven by the future use. What's the plan for this thing going forward? So sometimes codes dictate what that's going to be. Sometimes what the client is going to be storing or doing in the space is going to dictate swapping all of that stuff out. It's not directly correlated to lifting the roof. It's just something you have to approach while you're at it doing this structural renovation.
So there is no kind of easy button. Let's say we have a 3PL storage use, right? And we're missing 10 feet. So in general, sprinkler system goes out, electrical goes out, right? Or are we salvaging that? We need only 10 feet for extra racking, same use. Typically, can we salvage or like a general rule, we have to actually do them all?
Every part of that question you just asked exists on a spectrum of what's there and what needs to be there going forward. So you've got two, a starting and an end point, and you've got to work in both directions to get to that answer. And in some cases, that might be if somebody had done some lighting or electrical upgrades recently and the building is mostly good to go, even that 10 feet might not change anything. So you just drop in extensions and very inexpensively modify the entire systems. In other cases where you've got codes that have changed over 40 or 50 years, plus the height is getting taller, plus the storage is going to change, that might mean dropping the entire fire protection system and replacing it from scratch, including a pump that's going to be $100 to $2,000 all by itself just to get water up to the new height. And so you've got this wide spectrum of very minimal work and lots of work, and all of those systems are going to operate somewhere along that path after analysis. So you're correct. There's no easy answer for any of this stuff. It's not like you can rattle off square foot pricing, because never mind the code stuff that you have to do, people also make decisions about what they want to do. One of our most prolific developers does this. He says, lifting the roof isn't even a problem. It's not the question. It's, while we're doing this, what do we want this building to be? And so you do these renovations at the same time, just like when you move into a house, you might redo your kitchen right away because it's the right time to just bite that bullet.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Now, in terms of if we can dive in timing, how long typically the construction itself lasts, and how long the project itself lasts with opening the permits, closing the permits, what timelines we're looking at?
In general, a roof lifting project is going to take somewhere between 6 months and a year for reasonably smaller projects, smaller buildings, and skewing a little longer, 9 to 15, sometimes a little longer than that for bigger projects, with, the pre-construction, drawings, engineerings, permits, fabrication of steel, arranging crews, roughly half of that process.
Mhm.
But Matt can speak to the roof lifting part of it, the structural work, a little better.
Now, do you mind if we'll dive in a little bit in the cost? And I understand there is no per square foot cost, but have you developed any framework on pricing, like on pricing guidance? How the people look at they have the building called 100,000 square feet, and maybe there is some frameworks how to approximately gauge whether that's going to be $1 million project, $2 million project tied to some kind of size.
So you've keyed in on the right way to ask this question. I don't like square foot price as a metric because square foot pricing ignores scale, but you introduced 100,000 feet as a fixed scale, and so that's helpful. What I always would want to tell people is 100,000 foot range or framework has nothing to do with the same framework for 50,000 feet or 10,000 feet or 200,000 feet. They're all going to have different economies of scale. And so, 100,000 feet, a project all in, including the voluntary renovations people make while they're at it, is typically going to be between $2.5 and $5 million. And that's a massive range that may not even help a lot of people, but it really does depend on what happens with all of those systems. That's roughly half the project most of the time, is modifying, replacing, or just doing a voluntary improvement to stuff that has nothing to do with lifting the roof. Lifting the roof is just a catalyst to make all these improvements.
Well, I can let's say when you say that range, I think it helps. Say if you know that 100,000 square feet lifting the roof is gonna help you increase lease rate only by $1.50 or $2, $2.5 million capex minimum will not gonna be in range at all. But let's say the way I think, okay, so if a lifting the roof is gonna help me to increase lease rate about $3, and if the range is $2.5 million to $5 million, I think I have a shot to make it pencil out. Because if we get a project line at $3 million, but I can increase $3 in the lease rate on 100,000 square feet, it's almost like 10 cap on basis. So I have a shot penciling this in. Of course, if the project will come in at $5 million, and if it's $3 million increase in value per lease rate, it's going to be hard to finance it. But I think it comes down to the range, and we as a developer have to kind of gauge how much lease rate will increase based on that. So there's a logic to that. I can sense that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that every one of our projects ultimately becomes a math question where somebody like you has to do that payback calculation, and sometimes it doesn't work, and it's just because you don't have the right basis, you don't have the right exit value, or whatever, to justify doing this. And that happens to us every single day. But fortunately, we look at enough of these that we can do all right in the aggregate by looking at lots of deals. Real estate's hard.
Every week, I read hundreds of commercial real estate articles from across the US and around the world. I connect the signals, break down the Fed moves, and share real case studies, not theory, from my 2 decades of real estate experience and actively doing deals right now. My team and I spend 15 plus hours on a weekly basis and deliver this to you for free. You can read it in 5 minutes. So every Sunday at 9:07 a.m., you'll get major commercial real estate news that matters, one Fed insights that matters, one deep dive case study from me or one of our operators who already made the mistakes, so you don't have to. Thousands of commercial real estate operators and investors read this newsletter, especially in the value add space. And don't take my word for it. Check out hundreds of reader testimonials online. Plus, when you subscribe, you get instant access to a Proforma underwriting tool, the same one we use every single day to underwrite value add deals. Now, this is not for you if you're looking to get rich quick schemes, or if you're looking for theory and hallucinations, not real numbers, or you're not serious about commercial real estate. But if you want real tactics, real deals, real results, no bait and switch, go to joinvaluebuilder.com and subscribe for free. And see you there, guys. Can you give us a understanding how heavy is that construction on the site? I haven't seen it. Actually, no, I've seen it once, just passing by through on the highway, the company doing similar work. But let's say, mechanical side, the lifting the roof itself, and you're raising the roof with the hydraulic systems, and you're prepping that. How many people are on site? 100,000 square feet. Is that 5 boom lifts and 20 guys are working? How heavy is that project typically on a construction site? How does it look like?
Yeah. So typically for us, once we get to the site, we're not sending that massive of a crew. For 100,000 square feet, it's probably going to be a 6-man crew, right?
Mhm.
Guys that are educated in our system and our means and methods, are W-2 employees. They're going to be out there with, like you said, with boom lifts, with walls, with forklifts, the steel, and they're going to spend their time prepping the building. Our work's primarily at the columns, like I said, so there can be other trades in there working simultaneously as us. There can also be inventory in certain cases if the building is partially occupied to that extent. And then when we actually come to lift the roof, then it's a bigger crew like you're talking about. It's usually in the neighborhood of 15, 20 people in order to make that roof go up. And that process, compared to the overall timeline, it's pretty short, actually. Most roofs are lifted in 1 to 2 days. Once we actually start activating the hydraulics to the point where we finish lifting, it's all the prep that goes into it and getting it ready that takes the time. And then once we're done, again, you took the kit apart. Now you got to put the kit back together. Usually we're on site about the same amount of time after the roof is up as it took us to get it up, because we're putting everything back together.
Makes sense. So you're doing everything from from A to Z, meaning, let's say we need to modify the HVAC and fire suppression system. You typically do that, or that falls on developer after that when you lift the roof?
Besides LiftX, that's going to do the structural work in this chunk of time that Matt already determined, there's going to be work ahead of time to disconnect and modify some of these systems, plus do some demolition work to pave the way to get ready for that structural work to be done. And then after the roof is lifted, you've got to put back these systems into working order with utilities, et cetera, built to the new codes.
So, for example, when you're doing the project, in general, do you do the project turnkey from A to Z? Let's say if we need to, modify sprinkler system, mechanicals, HVAC, stuff like that, you in general complete it all the way, or you just lifting the roof, and typically on us at the end we need to modify the systems? Hello?
Something I'll add real quick, which is a common question too. If there are rooftop units that are savable on top of the roof, people are saying, do we have to take these off? No, the weight's typically not a problem. I mean, something massive, we'll look at it and analyze it, but most of your common MAUs, OTUs there, go up with the weight.
I have a specific question. For example, one of the buildings that we're thinking to possibly do this type of project. The question is about the columns. So the building is 76,000 square feet, 14.6 clear height. The column spacing is 32 feet. We had a couple bites from sports users like, soccer school and baseball school. They typically prefer to have some few columns eliminated. Do you think doing this process is advantageous or maybe very cost effective to remove columns, or there is no saving cost? Removing columns is still going to be supporting the roof and stuff like that. So the question again, do you see people requesting removing columns while we're doing roof lifting, or that's not common?
It's a very common request. It doesn't mean it's always practical.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason those columns are there. They're holding up the roof. And taking them away or even moving them is going to require structural modifications that Matt can handle easily. But in addition to the steel work that's above the floor, you're also going to have to do foundation work. Lifting roofs and doing niche structural work is cool, but it's not magic. And so those loads have to go somewhere. When the ask is limited, targeted, somebody that wants to do a gym and put in a swimming pool or a basketball court, move a couple of columns around, that's routine. It happens all the time, and LiftX is well suited to do that. When the request is take out half the columns in this building because I need to get modern column spacing, go technology from the beginning, that's taking a used car and asking for a new engine, a new transmission, new brakes, new tires. At what point is that no longer practical? In many cases, it just blows up the economics of it. Do you want to speak to that structurally, Matt?
No, I mean, you covered it very well. Another thing that's typical is removing columns. If you're going to do it from within the building, you're going to add structural support that's going to lower your clear height that's already low, typically. And so it might warrant having to raise the roofs even higher, which case that's not going to help the economics of the situation.
Matt, that was a really, really great episode. I hope a lot of people learned from this conversation. Now, if folks want to find you about your company or inquire or, and see if that would be a solution for their building, where can they find you?
Matt, why don't you speak to who you are, and then I'll kind of wrap up how this all fits together.
Yes. So for project inquiries, you can reach out to either one of us. If you'd like to find me, our website is liftxusa.com. I'm on LinkedIn as Matt DeVito. You can submit an inquiry for our website, or Rob can just tell them how to reach you.
And I've got my own website, rooflift.com. What Matt does is Matt does the real work. Matt is the one working on the bones of these buildings. What I help LiftX with and what I help real estate developers, brokers, owner-occupied persons do, I help them analyze whether it's worth bringing that car into the shop at all. I get into the big picture questions about, does this make sense? Does this pencil? What are these ancillary costs going to be? What are the alternatives? Sometimes the alternatives prove to be a more practical alternative for things like moving columns, like you said. So I get into feasibility and why, and Matt does the work once we identify the proper ones to get work done.
Makes sense. All right, guys. No, that was really informative. I really appreciate that. And hopefully we're going to work in one of the buildings that we need raised roofs because we have quite a lot of vintage products. We just need to go through this exercise. Thank you. I really appreciate it, guys.
Very
Thank
good.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Let me press stop.
You've been listening to the Value Builder podcast. For more strategies, stories, and episodes, head to valuebuilder.co or subscribe on your favorite app. Always make it better than you found it and keep adding value. See you in the next one.